Hey there, I'm Eric, and this is an 8Bitdo arcade stick. This is one of the most commonly recommended entry-level arcade sticks. When I got back into fighting games, this is the one that I got started on. Because of that experience, I wanted to do a review, talk about what I think are its best features, and also some of the issues that it has. I'd like to get right into this, so I'm going to head right over to my workbench here, and I'm going to start pointing out everything that there is on this stick as you get it right out of the box. Alright, so we're over here at the workbench now. Let's get started up in the top left with the control cluster. We have two dials here. The first one is for the controller type. Now this is labeled S, off, and X. S is for switch, and X stands for X input. If you know anything about Windows APIs, this is the name of the controller interface library that Windows uses. Your next dial controls what type of input the stick is in. That is either left analog stick, directional pad, or right analog stick. If you're buying this for fighting games, keep this dial set to DP for almost everything. One exception is the right stick though. Having it a click away is extremely useful for character customization screens, because the right stick is how these modes allow you to rotate the character around, and having it so close is a really nice touch. Moving along, this green button here is for Bluetooth pairing. The yellow button has a star in it, which is kind of hard to see. That is a turbo button. And this blue button here with 8Bit's logo in it will open up the game bar in Windows. This does the same thing as hitting Windows key G on your keyboard. Now moving one row down, we have this cluster of LED lights. These are going to spin in a pattern like this while searching for a connection, and then once connected are going to serve as a player number indicator. Next to that is the Bluetooth or 2.4G toggle. For the best wireless experience, you'll want to keep this in 2.4G if you can. And then next to that, we have our select and start button. They don't do anything that any normal select and start button don't do, so there's nothing else to say about them. Moving over to the right corner, we have two 24mm buttons labeled P1 and P2. Now these are buttons you can assign macros to in 8-bit software. I wouldn't recommend using macro buttons, especially if you're getting into fighting games. Take the time to learn and become consistent with your combos and specials. You'll be better for it. Now 8-bit has recessed these buttons into the case, which you can see here. So you're not going to have any accidental presses, and I think that's a thoughtful part in the design. Now, moving down to the real meat of this controller are the joystick and buttons. Both the stick and buttons are generics, which that's expected with a beginner or entry-level stick. The buttons are in a standard 8-button Vuelix layout and are clearly Sanwa OBSF clones. And for clones, they're actually pretty good. The joystick is less so. Now right here, you can see it has a lot of play in it. Let me see if I can get it dead centered for you. So you can see there's a lot of play there. And all of that is dead space, and nothing is being actuated right now. Being honest, I'm not entirely sure what this is supposed to be a clone of. An educated guess says a Sanwa JLF because that's by far the most common arcade quality stick, but again, I can't be sure. I will come back and talk details on both of these in a bit. Overall build quality is a highlight of this stick. This plastic case feels good, the panels aren't thin, and it's well reinforced. It has a good heft to it thanks to some metal plates that are added on the inside for weight. The plates help reinforce the case and keep it rigid. Now, I can go out of my way to try and twist and torque this case, and it is not going to bend or bow. And any spot that you would be resting your hands, like here or down here, feel well reinforced. I've only found a single spot on this case that bows under any pressure, and that is dead in the center of the button cluster here. Now that makes sense because this is a difficult area to reinforce, and honestly, I don't see myself putting very much pressure on here anyway. On the bottom, there are 4 non-slip pads. These pads are on the small side, however, they have a good thickness to them and a bit of squish. And when you combine that with the weight of the stick, the weight kind of presses down into them, and this thing is not going anywhere on a flat surface. The size of the case is good, though I think an ideal build would be just a little bit wider. I was able to sit comfortably with this in my lap, not squeezing my legs together, though I think it would have been an easier job if I had an extra inch on either side of the case. There is nothing on any of the sides of the case except for on the back. We have a trapdoor that holds the 2.4G adapter when it's not in use. You can see it right there. It rests in a cutout slot. That's not actually a port, though you can see that there's a USB-C port above it. This is what you will plug the USB-C end of the included cable into to play on this with a wired connection. That does it for an overview, so now I'm going to close this up and cut over to some game footage. I'm going to play through a few trials just to show what this stick is capable of. I'm going to be doing all this in wireless mode, which I should be pointing out here in a moment. I want to do this to show that this stick doesn't have any crazy latency on it. It's not a Brook wireless board, but the wireless on this stick surprised me with just how good it is. I think a common concern, or at least one that I had, was that entry-level or beginner sticks aren't capable of everything that a real stick is. So I picked out a handful of harder trials which should, hopefully, show an entry-level stick can do everything it could need to. Also, because I'm coming back around to talk details about the stick and buttons as promised, I'm going to be getting into critiques, and I didn't want to leave anyone with the impression this is a bad arcade stick. I'm starting out here with some Guilty Gear Strive. I think it's a good choice because it's popular right now and many people will be familiar with it. If you aren't, I'm doing trials about Roman cancels, which require fast, precise inputs for effective use. That out of the way, let's tackle the bigger issue first, the joystick. I feel confident saying this is the weak link of the controller. Most of its properties aren't bad on an individual level, but they don't mesh well, and they add up to a stick that feels clunky and off. I said most because there's one part that is just bad flat out, and that is the gate on the stick. It took me a while to figure out exactly why it felt so weird. There were times I swore it was getting, stuck or trapped in a corner during circular motions, especially quarter circles and especially quarter circles back. After staring at the gate of this stick and a real Sanwa gate, I finally saw it. On better made gates, the bottom of the stick where the actuator moves around in is flared out. Because the stick will be diagonal while moving, flaring out the bottom of the gate lets the actuator roll around better. Custom gates often push this further for even smoother actuation. The gate that comes on the 8Bitdo's joystick is a straight 90-degree cut, so the stick is always rolling around on a sharp edge and not a flat surface. So when it gets into corners, it's running up against the border of another hard edge, and it doesn't roll fluidly. It's sort of like it hits a wall. The natural reaction after feeling it stick in a corner like that is to put some oomph on the joystick, but then you run into its unusually low tension spring. I did some comparisons, and I think the spring is about half a pound of resistance. For context, a stock Sanwa JLF has a 1 pound spring. I took the 8-bit stick, a stock JLF, and a JLF modded with a 2 pound spring, and each one of those felt about twice as stiff as the one before it. Now, there's nothing wrong with light springs. Some people mod their sticks to be lighter even, but it feels weird on this because it's combined with a longer than average throw. Throw is how far the stick can go before it hits a wall, either the hole in the case or its gate. This differs from activation, which is how far a stick needs to move before it inputs a direction. Light resistance and long throw don't combine well, for me anyway. If I'm using a light spring, I'd like a shorter throw, so that way I only need slight movements of my fingers to control the stick. But the wider movement range here means I'm at the limit of my finger length, or I need to start getting my wrist involved, and it just negates any benefit the lighter spring might have given me here. I should have mentioned there is one other thing I think is objectively bad on this stick, and that is its micro switches. Those are the little buttons that the stick's actuator hits to input a direction. The joystick's microswitches don't have much resistance or click on them. On a JLF, the microswitches have this satisfying click when they actuate. Over time, you can get a feel for them. They have this little vibration in the stick, and you can start counting clicks and know exactly where you just moved to. But the microswitches on the 8-Bit's default stick are too light and mushy for that. And also, because the stick is so light, it can't reliably snap the shaft back to neutral, which is the center. And what ends up happening instead is the stick bumps into a switch on the opposite side you just pushed it to, so you always have to guard against ricochet. For example, if you pull the stick to the left and let it go, you're very likely to get a right input. Okay, that was a lot, and I don't have nearly as much to say about the buttons, because the buttons are completely unremarkable in a good way. They work well, they have good responsiveness. They're not Sanwa levels of responsiveness. I'd say they're an average to above average build quality. Like I said earlier, it's more obvious what these are copies of than the stick. Comparing them to real Sanwa OBSFs, they're stiffer, kind of like a Shimetsu button, though obviously not as high quality. There's almost a tactile feeling in them, but I hesitate to say that because I don't think it's an intentional design choice. I'm playing Skullgirls now. I know this game isn't as popular as Strive, but its combos have a lot of button presses, and I thought that would be a good way to show them off in a trial. The frames in this game are tight, so the combos here require a lot of speed to get right. Again, I think this speaks to the quality of the wireless connection and the components on this stick. Any complaints I have about them aside, they can absolutely get the job done. I think that's all there really is to say about these two, so I'm going to cut back over and get into some closing thoughts. So, I think that about does it for a review of the 8BitDo arcade stick out of the box. It retails for about $80 or $90, probably closer to $90 right now, meaning it sits at the upper level of the beginner tier price point. However, I think this is a good choice under the right conditions. Now, the most obvious of those conditions is if it works with what you're gaming on. Officially, the 8BitDo works with Switch and Windows, but unofficially, it's been known to work on Mac OS, Android, and Raspberry Pi. If wireless is a major selling point for you, this is a compelling choice, because there aren't a lot of good wireless arcade stick options. And because this is a Switch controller, the wireless functionality pairs up well with how you might use it. That is, docking it, playing on the TV while sitting on the couch. Now, the 8BitDo does come with a generously long cable included. However, with wireless, you don't need to drape that across your living room. Now, on a pettier note, there is the aesthetic. For some people, looking like a retro Nintendo controller is going to be a nostalgic selling point, and for some other people, it's going to be a childish knock against it. And unfortunately, if you don't like its appearance, there isn't a lot to be done. You could try and put some painter's tape over the plexi and take Krylon to the case, but there's not really a lot to be done, and this is about what it looks like. The last major point to mention is modding, which is a major part of its marketing. If you're interested in upgrading over time, the build quality of the 8BitDo makes it a good base for a mid-tier stick over the long term. And modding the 8BitDo is what I'm planning to cover in my next video. I'll be doing a full teardown and replacement of the stick and buttons, so you can see exactly what's involved in that. If you've gotten this far, thank you for watching my video. I really do appreciate it. If you wouldn't mind liking, commenting, and doing all that other stuff that YouTube likes to see on videos, I'd also really appreciate that. And maybe I'll see you in the next one. Thanks again.